Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, Omaha Productions own Jack Foster. Jack, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a great start to the month so far. It's Super Bowl week, so looking forward to that. The Luka trade was insane a couple of days ago, so it's been a busy sports week. It's been a busy day for me, and just thrilled to be on here with you, man.
Well, next week is preview week. We have a Hofstra game weekend. The Vols are back officially with baseball next weekend. So this is our last non-baseball weekend for a long time with Tennessee baseball.
Hunter Inslee days away. Let's go.
Hunter Inslee days away. I like it. But we'll get into baseball here momentarily, Jack Foster. But before we get into some baseball, we always want to start off with some football futures, with it being the offseason. There's a couple football things I want to ask you about, and I think this could be interesting. Is the first one, Peyton Lewis, who will be I think he burned his red shirt last year, right? He will not be a red shirt. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So he'll be a true sophomore in 2025. Do you think he will lead the Vols in carries more than folks are anticipating? Because I think there's been a lot of like, oh, it's going to be Star Thomas, Peyton Lewis, and Deshaun Bishop, very even, Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson type rotation from a couple years ago. But I do think there is enough to kind of wonder about with how much Dylan Sampson was used as a primary back this past year, that maybe Darrell Sims is not going to be the heavy rotation guy that Jerry Mack was in that room. What say you? Do you think that that's a possibility that we could get more Peyton Lewis than people are anticipating?
It's funny, your reason for what you just said about Darrell Sims maybe not being as heavy a rotation guy is actually why I'm going to sell this and say Peyton Lewis doesn't lead the Vols in carries, because I believe Deshaun Bishop will be Tennessee's best running back next year.
Interesting.
Or at least most explosive, making the most impact on a week in, week out basis. Peyton Lewis will be more of the plotter, more of the big back, maybe in goal line situations. We'll see what Star Thomas roles, becomes at Tennessee. I also think he'll be in the mix. All three guys will get playing time on a week-to-week basis, but I actually like Bishop to be the best back for Tennessee next year. So I'll say he ends up leading the Vols in carries in 2025.
I don't hate that. I think clearly there's a lot of trust in Bishop, and he played a lot this past year, but the part of the issue with Bishop is I don't know if he can stay healthy. Like I don't know what his availability is going to be like, because he has not been able to finish these last two seasons. Different things, but I mean, you haven't gotten a full season out of Deshaun Bishop yet, and I think he's a talented player. I just wonder if he's going to have to you're going to have to be careful with him with his carry count and with his usage, just because he is more, I don't want to throw the injury prone out this early in his career, but it is something that you have to kind of monitor a little bit. And still, Peyton Lewis is your highest rated back that you have brought in the Heupel era. He showed flashes down the stretch last year. I do wonder, because I mean, there are a lot of natural parallels between Bishop and Small. I think Bishop has a little bit more juice and a little bit more explosion than what Jabari had early on at Tennessee. But I think your point is well taken, of like, it could be a lot of Bishop starts, and Bishop gets the first two series, or even just the first series with the first team, because they just trust him the most. And then you get more Peyton Lewis. Like I could see something like that where maybe Deshaun Bishop leads stuff each game and gets a lot of starts, but we look here in November and Peyton Lewis has the most amount of carries, and it's not really close. I could see something like that too.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a scenario where it's not going to be close. I think it'll be relatively close between all three throughout the season, assuming Star Thomas, is good enough to be in the mix. And
yeah,
that's really the thing with Peyton Lewis here is I think Peyton Lewis has to be significantly better than Star Thomas to see enough playing time to lead Tennessee in this category, because I think Deshaun Bishop's role is not in much jeopardy. Now, the injury thing, I typically evaluate everything, whether it's fantasy betting, just talking about Tennessee, is everyone stays healthy. Like I base off my predictions on that, because it's impossible to predict injuries. You can acknowledge more players are injury prone than others, but to predict injuries, it can get hairy. So I just stick with clean slate. Everyone stays healthy. I do think Bishop leads, but if you had to ask me which running back is the most likely to get injured, you have to say Bishop in that spot. So that's a good point. injuries could create a less than ideal season for Bishop and, prevent him from reaching his potential. But I am high on him going into 2025. I like what I saw in 24, and the Lewis Thomas debate will be and competition really will be one to watch in the fall and spring.
And we should throw Star Thomas in. He's just a wild card. I mean, he got a lot of
Right.
carries and he's an older dude. What is he, 24, 23? Coming in from Duke.
I don't know his exact age, but I think it's his fourth year, right?
Is it fourth or fifth? I thought it might be his fifth. Maybe not.
Maybe it's like two seasons at his first school. I'll check.
Which was New Mexico State, right? I think
Yeah,
New
with
Mexico State.
old Diego.
There you go. But he's a wild card. But he's coming in I don't think he's coming in not to get carries and to not be somewhat featured in 2025. I've gone back and forth on this. I don't think it's going to be a one guy earns the most amount of trust from Darrell and he gets the Dylan Sampson treatment in 2025. I just think it's going to be a rotation. I would be very, very surprised if it's not a more of a rotation situation and close to what we saw the last couple of years than what we saw this past year. I think that was a one-off this past year.
There's no question it'll be more rotation just because the talent gap last year was so wide. Like Dylan Sampson was just far and away Tennessee's best back and, stayed healthy. So, yeah, it'd be a much more rotation, but I do think that you can see Tennessee lean more on a guy moving forward than maybe we'd seen in the first 3 years of the Heupel era when it was just really any given week. This year, I think Bishop will be Tennessee's top running back on a regular basis, but all three will contribute, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jalen Wright, 2023 Jalen Wright's the best back Tennessee's had. I just don't think he could carry. He could have I think he's the best back by far.
Well, he was the best at, one cut, house it.
No, not even that. I mean, when he gets to the second level, like he's
better.
Gone. Like his 7.5 yards per carry, like Jalen Wright he put on the weight. He was already a speedster coming out of high school. He could get to when he gets to the second level. You saw against Georgia and a couple other games where he's gone. And he was so good at staying upright. Like in that Kentucky game, he had a couple where he just bounces off dudes and just keeps going. Like he is the kind of guy who can make defenses pay the most when you're going light boxes against Tennessee because of the wide splits, because of how teams play Tennessee. A back like Jalen is the most dangerous for this Tennessee offense. I just think he's the most. That kind of back is the kind of back who is the most important on Tennessee. Like I think Dylan Sampson, his usage and his durability was big because I don't think Jalen had that kind of durability and was going to be able to do the kind of stuff that Dylan did, especially in the second half this past year. But in terms of just the best version of all these different running backs who's been in Tennessee the last 4 years, I just think Jalen Wright in 2023 was the best version of any of them. And I don't even think it's close. I really think like it was just a different haymaker type deal where Jalen scared defenses. I think what was Dylan's longest run this past year? Was it 50 yards maybe? 45, 50?
I'm not sure. But my hang up with this is that, Jalen, the most dangerous, had the highest upside on a every play basis. But Sampson carried Tennessee multiple occasions. Jalen Wright never really carried Tennessee.
I mean, Sampson was Frank Gore.
Sampson was more valuable to Tennessee than Jalen Wright. Like he ended up being the reason Tennessee was able to win some games more often than Jalen Wright.
I think kind of. I think Jalen was good. I think the scoring defense and not allowing 20 plus points in every single game outside of the Georgia game was a big reason. And I also think Dante Thornton was the bigger reason. I think you can make the case Dante Thornton was more important.
I'm just comparing these two here. I'm not talking the rest of the team. Just Wright v. Sampson. And by the way,
and we're picking hairs. Like, let me be perfectly clear. I love Dylan Sampson and he was really good this past year. But if the conversation that we're having is Jalen or Dylan in 23 versus 24, then I am gonna put I'm just pretty ardent in this. It's Jalen.
And rewind a little bit to a game that would have not sat well at all with Vol fans if they had lost, and that's the road trip to Lexington. Who put that game on ice at the end?
Yeah,
Dylan Sampson.
I mean, Jalen could have done that. Jalen. I'm just saying, man. Jalen.
Dylan Sampson did do it.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying I'm not against Dylan Sampson. Like Dylan Sampson was a great back for Tennessee this past year. Dylan Sampson's not a home run. He was not a home run hitter for Tennessee this past year. And I think with this offense, like having somebody like Jalen who is just such a game wrecker and actually can make defenses pay for living in light boxes, I think he's the different kind of guy. Like DeJuan Morris is the next Jalen Wright type. Like if you had to tell me right now of anybody in this room who fits what Heupel and this scheme is trying to do the most, and I could see having the most success over the next 2-ish years, I think it's DeJuan Morris, the true freshman out of Oakland. Like he's probably who I'm buying the most stock in right now.
That's fair. And I guess we just have different definitions of best because
it's okay.
That is
Ryan's going to love this. Like Ryan's going to be like, oh my God.
He's definitely going to agree with me.
Oh, 100%. 100%. The other Tennessee future. Tennessee will or will not miss James Pearce in 2025. Jack Foster.
So you can't say Tennessee will not miss a talent like James Pearce.
I can. They're not going to miss him.
But no, that's my answer. But I'm going to say, I don't think Tennessee's going to miss him all that much. You're always going to miss a guy as talented as James Pearce. I was prefacing it with that, giving James Pearce his flowers as a first-round guy and an elite edge rusher. But Tennessee returns a lot at the edge spot. Jordan Ross is a year older. Caleb Herring's a year older. Josh Josephs looked great last year. I mean, and the other side of the line isn't weaker now. Don Bailey's back, so there's no worry there. Tyree West, same deal. So on the edge, on the perimeter for Tennessee, it's all systems go from last year. Run it back. It's the interior that is the question mark. So no, I don't think Tennessee's going to miss James Pearce all that much. I don't think you'll look back at all in 2025 and be like, man, we need those games where James Pearce is just wrecking folks. Like, I think Josh Josephs can do that. I think other guys can do that. And it's not like Pearce just had a tremendous season in 24 anyway. Definitely not as good of a season as you thought he'd have. So little callback there. But no, I don't think Tennessee's going to miss James Pearce all that much, which is more of a testament to Rodney Garner and the talent Tennessee has at the edge position rather than Pearce. But that's just the reality.
I think two things can be true. I think James Pearce is an elite talent. I think he's a first-round guy for a reason. I think James Pearce is a really good player. Let me be clear. It's not that it's not a James Pearce reason as to why Tennessee's not going to miss him in 2025. It's more of what you're talking about, which is they develop and they have so many Leos behind him this year where I just think part of the big, and I talked to Brent Hubbs of VolQuest about this last week, because my theory all year was that Tennessee misplayed their hand this offseason in terms of how they handled Tyler Barron and the replacement there, because Tyler Barron was huge for James Pearce in 23, where those two on pass rush situations were getting home a lot more. They were like that Rabbits package with the two of them, like Barron on the strong side defensive end and being able to slide in when he needed to. He was a game wrecker on the other side. So it made Pierce's life better. And it made, I mean, it was just really, really hard to keep Barron and Pearce in check on obvious passing situations. And they tried to, and this is a Moneyball thing, they tried to replace Tyler Barron in the aggregate, where they were like, well, maybe if we just rotate Don Bailey, Jason Jenkins, and Tyree West, we should be able to get what one guy got in Barron. And they were wrong. Like, it just that, I mean, you saw it against Georgia, you saw it against Ohio State, you saw it in some big games down the stretch where they weren't able to get home before. And it was just not, the defensive line did not have the kind of season they needed to have down the stretch. Like, they're still good, but like you talk about Bailey at the defensive end, they need to move him in. Like, with where they're at interior numbers wise, like, I think the hope is like Bailey can slide inside and you have Eason, Bailey, Moy, and Hobbs as your rotation there. And on the edge, you open it up because Tyree Weathersby was a highly touted guy, 4-star kid coming out of Georgia. You have Tyree West, who flashed a little bit last year, and then Isaiah Campbell, who's your first 5-star strong side defensive end you've brought in the Heupel era. And Marion Dye, another one who looks more like a defensive end than a Leo. That's where you need to get an upgrade. Like, that's where you actually, I think, need to find somebody to take the pressure off Joshua Josephs, Jordan Ross, Caleb Herring on that opposite side, because it was less this year about Pearce taking a step back, because I don't think that was the case. I think it was just the defensive line around him was not as dominant. So I think teams were able to kind of look at Pearce and go at Pearce a little bit more than they were 2 years ago with Pearce and Barron on big time snaps.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's a really good take. Moving Bailey inside, I haven't thought about that, but that would work. And I think it'd solve a lot of issues along that Tennessee defensive line. And you can't tell me that there's not more upside with those guys behind Bailey on the strong side than with Bailey in his 5th or 6th season, wherever he's at now.
Yeah.
So Yeah, let those guys loose a little bit. Weathersby's obviously had injury issues. Hopefully it can be full go for him. West, I think, is a great player, and there's a lot of other young guys there too. And the Leo spot is just stacked, like
Yeah,
we've talked about. So even if Josephs takes a step back or something, or has an injury, I think you feel pretty good with the guys behind him.
I agree. Switching gears to baseball, Jack Foster, transfer that you think will ultimately have the best season of any transfer on Tennessee's baseball season will be who?
Yeah, I'll give two answers: one offense, one defense, or one at the plate, one on the mounds, and both are previously from old Oxford. Liam Doyle
Oh,
and Andrew Fisher. I don't think it's that hot of a take. I think Andrew Fisher is going to have a lot of home runs, and
yeah.
the defensive, capabilities at third base are a question mark going into the season, but I don't think it'll be all that awful, and it would take a lot to remove Fisher from third, given what we saw to Billy Amick last year at third defensively. So it obviously would take a lot for that to happen, given how poor Billy was defensively. So I don't think it'll be a nightmare for Tennessee. It won't be ideal in some cases, but I don't think it'll be too bad. And he's just going to rake, and he's probably going to be a fan favorite. The word is he's great personality, brings that Tennessee baseball, attitude with him. So that's a thing fans love to hear. And then Liam Doyle, I would expect to have a tremendous season on the mound for Tennessee in a Friday night role. He'll probably be the most impactful transfer on the roster. If I had to say one guy, it would be Liam Doyle. But yeah, both guys from Ole Miss who, Tennessee struck gold with in the portal. I expect big things from in the spring.
Especially, it's funny on the Friday nights. It's like Tennessee just lives like their best situations are like Friday night transfers, like Andrew Lindsay 2 years ago to Charlotte because you try to go in house and get Chase Burns on it, and that didn't work. And then last year AJ Kazi and then Chris Stamos, and it's like
Doe was a transfer in 22,
yeah,
and he ended
Doe
up
was a transfer. So and a Southern guy. So I mean, it's a good track record of transfer pitchers being the Friday night guy for Tennessee. So I'm with you. I think Liam Doyle is gonna be really good this year, and you're not gonna have a mid-season adjustment on Friday night, is my guess. I think Liam Doyle is just he's gonna have that locked in all year long, is my guess.
Yeah, I would agree. And Gavin Killen will be really solid. He was Ryan's pick to lead the team in batting average this season, just as far as having the highest floor, game in, game out basis, and being really solid. And he's good defensively too. So, these other transfers, Osuna, I think is a little bit more of a wild card. He could be just an absolute tank for Tennessee, but we'll see what comes of him this year. Obviously, an older guy, so he has that going for him. But there's a lot to choose from. I just think the Ole Miss guys will, when all is said and done, be the most impactful.
And Fisher too, it's interesting when you talk about with the defense at third, like one of the differences this year versus Amick last year, though, I wonder about is Ariel is so good defensively. And if his bat's a little bit better than a year ago, it's like one of those where if Abernathy wins the left field job at some point early on this year, and you have Abernathy in left, and you have a DH question where it's like, could it be
Bargo.
But that's the thing. Like what? Like I'm not saying all the time.
Bargo
I'm just saying
Wallace, I think, is who that is.
Right. But there's more heat and more pressure behind Fisher at third than I think Billy had at third last year. I think there's a lot more juice there where you could slide Dean Curley over and you could put Ariel at short and Gavin Keelan at second and move Fisher to DH sometimes. Like I think there's more of I would be less surprised about Fisher getting DH spots than Amick a year ago, because I just think I don't know where Ariel is going to be, because he's just such a super talented guy that you're gonna. I wonder. Like, I don't know where the bat is this year, but it's interesting. Like I think there's more opportunity to move that around a little bit, because I think they're moving back and forth. Isn't the plan like Keelan and Curley to like alternate shortstop and second early on this year or something? Like,
honestly, who knows? And when it all comes down to it, it probably doesn't matter all that much. Like both guys are going to be good at both spots. Keelan played short last year. I wouldn't worry about that. Your theory about it being easier to pull Fisher off of third is just solely dependent on how good Ariel is at the plate. That's it. Because I don't think Ariel is like, any better defensively. He's a wizard out there. We know he's Tennessee's best defender. Like, he's Tennessee's best defensive player. He's an all SEC.
Right. And it's just hard to keep that guy on the bench all year.
Yeah. But they did it last year, and you saw how great it was. when
Yeah.
Amick was out with appendicitis, and you saw how good Bargo was at third and how much
Yeah.
it improved his offense. I honestly thought Tennessee should have just kept, should have put Billy Amick at DH, because there just were too many instances down the stretch. I'm like, this is going to cost this team a national championship. It didn't, but that was always in the back of your mind watching Tennessee. It's like, man, Stamos starting us off and Billy at third. Like that's the worries here. But they never pulled the trigger, and I think Tennessee's coaching staff is pretty conservative for the most part. Outside of a Chase Burns role switch, they've been really conservative in recent memory. So I don't. They're not trigger happy, with pulling guys off a spot. So I think it'd take a lot for Fisher to not be at third.
But you just had so many guys you just knew, like left field, you knew, center field, you knew, right field, you knew, third, you knew, short, you knew, second, you knew, first, you knew, catcher, you knew.
Well,
it's a little bit different.
It's
this is a more loaded
Ew.
group and more question marks. Like there's just more competition to me this year. There's more spots up for grabs, and I just don't think. I don't know. My gut is it's just more. I think there's going to be a lot more experimentation in this year's team than last year. I think you're going to see a lot of different guys in and out of the lineup, and a lot of different early on at least. Like I think you're going to see some weird combinations.
No, that's totally fair, and that's bound to happen when you have as much turnover as Tennessee does this year. I mean, they lost everybody,
Yeah.
So outside of center and right, like. Keelan and Curley are going to start, but you don't know if it's at second or short. So center and right feel like the only two spots where you're like, oh yeah, I know who's going to play there every game this season.
I mean, you hope Chapman. Chapman has the talent.
Be okay.
But I mean, this is a big year for Chapman too. Like he's got to prove it.
I think it'll be.
Final thing here, and we'll get out of here, Jack. Your favorite bullpen arm in this year's group, because I think it's a quietly just stacked bullpen potentially, and I'm fascinated by it, but what say you? Who's your favorite bullpen arm this year?
Well, it's got to be a new guy just for the fun of this question, right? Like
you could say Binky if you're like Binky's making the jump. He's making the leap here. Binky could be like your closer this year. Is he going in the Redmond Walsh zone? Is he going in the Kirby Cannell zone where he's just going to be your long relief like lefty guy where we see him a bunch and we're looking at the innings. We're like Binky played a lot this year.
I would more say Binky is the Kirby role. Marcus Phillips, I'm very excited to see what he can do this year. I don't know if he's going to be great, but man, he's got the tools, and if he can put it together, watch out. As in these late game spots, he's fireman, and he's got the Lil Wayne song for a reason when he comes out there. So Marcus Phillips is the one I'm most excited to watch / interested, intrigued. Haven't, caught as much preseason ball as some of the other guys on the beat. Given up their obligations. So a lot of the new guys I haven't watched in action, it's just what you hear. Sounds like Brandon Arvidsson is obviously a very dynamic pitcher, has the heat and
play for Sunday.
A really high ceiling too. Yes, he is. But a really high ceiling for Arvidsson. But ultimately Nate Snead will be Tennessee's best bullpen arm. I think. I don't think Nate Snead will end up being a weekend starter. So he'll be Tennessee's best bullpen arm again. But Marcus Phillips is the one I'm most interested to watch this year.
I love it. Jack Foster, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Omaha Productions this week?
Yeah, so a lot of Super Bowl stuff this week from the Mina Kimes show. You can follow her at Mina Kimes on both Twitter and Blue Sky. A lot of stuff that she's putting out, I produced and edited, so it's pretty cool. SV Pod, we got Nick Wright interview coming out later this week, potentially Jason Kelsey interview as well. So some fun stuff happened over with Scott Van Pelt and Stanford Steve over at SV Pod. And then Always College Football, we just had Matt Mock on the show to the first two Nick Saban quarterbacks to win a national championship. Greg McElroy, Matt Mock in reverse order. But that was a fun.
Were you alive when Matt Mock won a national championship?
Yes, that was one. So kind of.
Good God.
Yeah.
I feel
so that was a fun time with them two exchanging Saban stories. So Always College Football, check that out.
Matty Mock, man, that is not a name I've heard in a long time.
He's a dentist.
Is he really?
Yeah, he lives in Colorado and he's a dentist. Like, he was just chilling, being a dentist. And, he's got his family. Like, he's not involved in sports at all. So it's kind of cool. Just sitting, like, he did the interview in his office. Like, he was literally at work. That was pretty cool.
It's like a Seinfeld thing where it's like where George buys the John Boyd car just because it's John Boyd drove it, and I feel like there are some people who just go to the dentist and are like, "Why did you pick your dentist?" It's like he won a national title at LSU, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Is that really the reason you want to pick your dentist?" Is like he won a natty, and it's like, "Hey, he's Matty Mock. What do you want me to do?"
Like, hey, he played in the minors. He was coached by Saban. Went to the NFL for a bit. Like, dude's been around.
I'm sure he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I don't trust him.
Yeah, he can take care of a crown.
Sure.
Jack Foster, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
The Chase Thomas Podcast. For people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, hello. Welcome back. Chase Thomas Podcast, taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. We've got a first-timer, John Wilkerson, 991, the sports animal, voice of the Tennessee Vols baseball team. Hello, win column. We've got John Wilkerson on the Chase Thomas Podcast for the first time. John, good afternoon. How are you?
Doing fine, Chase. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you for being here. How did you first come up with that? Did you workshop different things that you, when you were first getting the voice of the Vols, that you were thinking about, like, how do I want to close this game? Is that the one that came up the most of, like, how do I want to sign off a Tennessee victory?
That was something that developed over time. Of full transparency, I was a big fan of the Texas Rangers because I could pick up their games here in Knoxville. Mm-hmm. And so Mark Holtz was the voice of the Rangers, and that's how I used to cap Texas Rangers victories, was Hello Win column. And he passed away, unfortunately, in the late 90s. And so as I continued to get deeper and deeper into my run, it was probably about the mid-2000s that I started to sprinkle it in. Well, actually, I guess it would be, it'd be the early 2010s. So it was just something that Tennessee wasn't doing a whole lot of winning. So I thought that'd be a nice way to just a tip of the cap, a tribute to Mark. And then at the same time, just to mark a Tennessee victory. And so it really came into full-time use probably about 10 or 11 years ago in terms of what I do with the Vols.
I love that. Is there, because one of the things that's so fascinating to me about like that being able to do that at an elite level is, I think from the outside looking in, and like my broadcasting is very different, and I look at what you do excellently, and one of the things that I think is so hard to do is knowing when to take pauses, when to take breaks, when to be boisterous, when to be subtle. Is that something that you just get used to as time goes on? Was it somebody you modeled after? Was it the Rangers? Was it different things that you just kind of grew up listening to baseball on the radio that you kind of naturally knew when to kind of go up and down? Because that always, that to me is just so fascinating, because I think it's just got to be so difficult to know when and where. Like, and now I'm sure that it's just very easy because you've gotten so many reps, but before I'm curious.
Well, as you do mention, I mean, not only was it I used to get the sporting news, the preseason Major League Baseball magazine, and I would just, as an exercise, take the AM radio to the best part of the house, which was the a living room corner, right, the front, and I would just see how many different broadcasts I could get, how many different teams I could get, and so the fact that I could reach all the way down to Dallas, Fort Worth. That was something, and I enjoyed the pace of play. Now, as far as sitting in my seat, there were a lot of different paths and different considerations and things along those lines. I had the chance to work with Mike Keith. He was the voice of Tennessee baseball before I got to occupy that chair, and so working with Mike, influenced by his approach as well as his delivery, and at the same time, you always want to be true to yourself. But there were some good lessons learned along the way. One of the ones that was the toughest, but it makes the most sense, is realizing that, and I used to think you had to call it as soon as it happened. And for me, it was realizing that you can take a breath. Instead of perhaps getting in front of yourself and trying to call the action as it happens, you can take just the slightest beat, process what's going on, and then relay it, because the vast majority of your listeners aren't watching or there. So they're listening. They're allowing you to paint the picture for them. And so knowing that I didn't have to say that it was a hot grounder to short, immediately to second, and on to first in time for the double play, you could go ahead and say it was a backhanded stab as he's going to his right towards third. Great play, strong throw, and then, and gets the runner by a step. You have the opportunity just to catch your breath for a quick second, because you control the pace. You get to do that. And it took me a little while to really have that sink in, because you can't help the reflexes to call it as it happens. I mean, immediately. But the longer that you get to sit there and realize that you can set a pace, bring good energy, and at the same time know that you've got a little wiggle room, that's it's a significant comfort, and it's something that I do appreciate the opportunity to do.
Do you remember what you were feeling when Teegan Kuhns went in?
As far as game 3?
Game 3, yes. Like,
yeah.
Do you remember what that feeling was like? Because I remember what it was like for me, but you're calling the game. Do you remember just what you were feeling? You're like, okay, let's see if he can do this. Let's see, it's on short rest. Like, can he get out of this inning, and can Tennessee pull this off? Do you remember what you were feeling?
Well, I was thinking a lot of the same things. The fact that it was a very short turnaround, but at the same time, he had been so effective. And to look at what the season was like for Aaron was remarkable, because as it starts, he's working much earlier in games than he used to, and he actually even started a game.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a little while for him to hit his stride. And I actually think that it was in a loss at Auburn that he really took the step forward and kind of inserted himself into the season as he was expected to be. And so the fact that you just look at what this Tennessee team had done the entire year. They lose the first game of the series. They rally to win the second game and force the winner-take-all Monday night showdown. And then lo and behold, it was just a squad that everybody embraced the opportunity to do their part. And so while I was curious to see exactly how strong the velocity would be or what the bite of the breaking stuff would be, I was also very confident that you had somebody that had done what Aaron had done already to help Tennessee be in this position. And so I was very confident that he would get it done. But like you, it's kind of like, does he need the extra mile an hour if indeed it's 95 as opposed to 97? But yeah, I was just so confident in what Tennessee was going to be able to do to finish that game that I couldn't wait to see how it unfolded.
How do you think Tony Vitello has changed the most since he first got to Tennessee to now?
Wow, that's a good question. I do think that he's very patient, and I also think that he is somebody who does such a good job of allowing the incredible assistants and staffers around him to do what they do. And I don't think that was ever a problem for him, but I do think that he was kind of working at a frenetic pace. He was driving perhaps about 5 miles an hour faster than he needed to. So I think there's been just a steady confidence that has built, and also the fact that he is somebody who can go with the flow. I think that perhaps is a little bit different. And I also think that he, for lack of a better word, has calmed down because in seeing that, and I do think that the program fed off of his energy. And I'll never forget so early on. And in fact, it might have been going back to his first ever series as Tennessee's coach against Maryland, that there's a disputed play at first and he sprints out of the dugout. I mean, it would have been nice to see what his 40 time was at that point in time, but he sprints to the umpire and starts to argue. And I think he got a nice little nod from the umpire. It's like, don't do that again. And so, but I just think he was this ball of energy. And I think as his tenure has unfolded and it has grown, I think he has matured as a coach. I think he has evolved as somebody who would have an impact on exactly what the approach is, whether it's in the batter's box, on the mound, or in the field. And so I think that he has allowed himself to breathe. And the fact that his team has followed that lead is what made last year so impressive, because they had no use for what they had done the day before, and they weren't going to worry about what might be the situation they face tomorrow. Everything was about what you do right here, right now. And he worked so hard from the time he arrived to help redevelop his players as much from the neck up as anything physically in working in, strength and conditioning or in the weight room, different things like that. I just think that it's a very strong mental approach. It's one that you have faith in what you've done to prepare yourself for this moment, and then just playing ball. So I think that his biggest change is he's been able to slow down, just a bit. I mean, he runs 24/7, but I think he's been able to just slow his miles per hour down a significant amount. And it's as much the game coming to him and realizing, all right, here's what I have to do, but I'll be ready when the time comes.
Interesting. Did you think, I mean, before the year, because I was going back and before doing this here with you, John, I was thinking back to how I felt about where this team was. Because, I mean, this is the best run in Tennessee baseball over the last 4 years. And we had different feelings coming into different years. And it's kind of funny. Like, I think the strongest preseason national buzz was the most arduous of the 4 years for Tennessee in 2023. But when you think back to 2024 and what you were feeling coming into the year, did it feel like they would be the number 1 overall seed, that they would win the SEC tournament, that they would just be the first team to win a national title as the number 1 overall seed in 25 years? Did that feel like a realistic possibility? Like you were that certain that this team was going to be the team that got over the hump based on who they were bringing in?
It's hard for a program that had never done it to think that you were going to open the season and say, yep, this is where they become the first Tennessee team to win a national championship. Mm-hmm. I liked what they had going. And I think what you learned in 2023 is that, and I wish more fans would have this approach, is there's the benefit of the doubt. Because to experience what you did in 2023 and now get ready for 2024, I just don't see how you couldn't go ahead and say, you look at how hard this staff worked to adjust on the fly, because 2023 was not easy. You're expected to follow up on 2022. You were the best team ever that didn't win anything in regards to not even getting out of your super regional. But at that point in time, you have the nation's best pitching rotation as viewed from 2022 to 2023. And then it's just not clicking. And so you're 5-10 at the break. You make the adjustments you do. Chase Burns goes from the starting rotation to the bullpen. And then you get that so imperative series win against Vanderbilt week 6. And that allowed Tennessee to springboard. They wind up going to the second College World Series with this staff in 3 years. And so they won a game. And while there were hopes that they would do more, you knew that you had to replace Chase Dolander. You knew you had to replace Chase Burns, who had departed and had gone to Wake Forest. And then you had Drew Beam. So I do think it was curious to see with the additions from the portal who was going to play what roles and who was going to step up where and when. But you love the fact that you had a lot of third-year guys because Drew Beam was there in 2022 as a freshman. Same for Christian Moore. Same for Blake Burke. And you had added some really nice pieces in Billy Amick. So I think there was reason for optimism, and especially for the way that you had punctuated 2023. I was optimistic about 2024, and I was expecting Tennessee to be in the position it had been the year before, and that's another trip to Omaha, something they had never done in back-to-back years. I thought they had a chance, but I also fully understood why there were other teams in the Southeastern Conference that were thought to be in better shape than the Vols going into the season.
I also think back, I have you just stuck in the back of my mind during my wife and I, we were on our way to a Nashville weekend getaway, and we're driving down the road, and I'm listening to you call Tennessee Texas A&M in 23. And I remember, because this was right around when you're talking about when it kind of flipped 5-10 in SEC play, like it's not working. Like there's just something off. And the Burns experience was just that's a whole conversation for another day. But Andrew Lindsey, kind of the forgotten guy, that's when he broke out. And I remember listening because I think he had a bases loaded jam. He got out, and I think there were no outs when he came in, and he just calmed the storms. And then that was it. It was like from that moment on, this was the Andrew Lindsey show, and I think that was a huge part of 2023 kind of getting back on track was that what he was able to do against A&M. Do you remember that series in that moment? Because it's really stuck in my mind listening to you talk about like getting out of the jam and just what that was for Lindsey and his confidence, and for Tennessee it's like, oh, we may have something here. We may have something with Andrew Lindsey here. We might need to lean into this a little bit more.
Yeah, he moved into the Friday slot, and it was because he competed the way he did. It was the desire that he showed on the mound. One of the things that Tony Vitello has always hoped for with his team is that he wants you to play with emotion, but he doesn't want you to play emotionally. So you can't let what is going on, either in your favor or not, at the plate impact what your approach is going to be either on the mound or in the field defensively. So you don't want anything to be under your skin. And so while you want guys, he just said that there was such a desire to win from Lindsey that there was no better place for him than to set the tone going into a weekend. And so I think that was something that came earlier in that first half of the schedule against Florida, to where it's like, I want my guys to have that kind of sense of urgency. And at the same time, it's not that there's anything wrong with playing like your hair's on fire. It's just that every now and then it's going to get the better of you. So it was playing with fire, but at the same time, not getting too emotionally wrapped up in it. And I thought he was the perfect guy. He's, as you mentioned, he's one of the forgotten members, does not get as much of the spotlight or the credit that he deserves for what he meant to that team and really helping settle down the pitching rotation as well as setting an impressive tone for each of those second half series.
Absolutely. When you think of just the guys that you were able to watch last year, and I mean, there's a lot of turnover from the national title team to this year, specifically in the lineup. Who are you going to miss calling the most that you just enjoyed watching, and you're just like, man, I'm really not going to watch him play in a Tennessee uniform anymore?
That's a really good question, because there are just so many guys. You take a look. I mean, you had 5 guys that hit 20 or more home runs, and to know how rare that was for Tennessee. I mean, you had been a little more than a half dozen in the history of the program that had ever done it, let alone 5 in the same season. And so you can just go around. I mean, you appreciate what the pitching staff thought of, how the high regard they had for Cal Stark and what he meant to the team. Just the way he handled the staff. Anything you got from him at the plate was entirely gravy, but he was also somebody who could wreck the other side if the situation presented itself. Blake Burke, loved the fact that he was a power-hitting freshman and mostly a designated hitter for his first 2 years at Tennessee. And then you look at how he worked so hard to turn himself into not just a defender at first, but a plus defender at first base and anchoring the infield. And you can just go around. Christian Moore, the same thing. I mean, he and Blake split time in their spot in the lineup as freshmen. And then lo and behold, here they are each doing things. They both at one point held the record in terms of Tennessee's career home runs. So it would really be tough. Dylan Dreiling, of course, how masterful he was in turning himself into a hitter against left-handed pitchers when he was 0 for the first year that he got some serious looks as a freshman, to then hitting more than 380 against left-handers the next year. And I mean, I guess if you look for one, it would be to see the steady influence and impact. I thought Drew Beam, what he meant to this team from the time he arrived on campus, and he was somebody who'd been banged up a little bit in high school. So I think that kind of tempered expectations. But for him to be the Sunday slot guy in 2022, have so many big weekends that were riding on his shoulders. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Drew, but at the same time, there are a lot of 1As, Bs, and Cs that come into this conversation. But I just love the way that we got to see last year's team be the capping achievement for the guys that arrived here to do exactly what they did, and that's win a championship, win championships, because Tennessee, I think, won a total of 6 trophies when all was said and done last year. But anyhow, I just love the way everything culminated because they worked so well together.
And maybe the last of that 3-year run guys, right? With Burke and Simo. I mean, Vitello's talked about that. Like, we'll see. I mean, that's one of the more confusing things, John, I got to tell you, is not figuring out who's draft eligible after 2, who's 3. Because those 3, when you have 3 years to kind of, part of the reason that I think Simo and Burke are just going to be so beloved by Tennessee forever is that you saw them progress. I mean, that's the thing that's still just, you can't replace that. Like the 1-year runs in the portal, like Amick was really good for you last year, but it's different. Like Amick, like obviously you have the clap and everything, so that will always live on, but it's just different because you saw Simo and Burke go from not really playing to playing a little bit more to them being the stars of a national title team. Like, it's just, you're not going to see that very often, I think, in college baseball going forward. And I kind of wonder where things go in that regard, because Dean Curley, I think, is very much a possibility of being the best player on Tennessee this year, and he's draft eligible after 2 years. So you might only get 2 of Dean Curley here. And it's just kind of, it is what it is. That it's not a fault of any of the guys. It's just trying to keep up with who's a 2-year guy and who's a 3-year guy. But I wish we had more 3-year guys, I guess, is a long way of what I'm saying, John, because it was more special, I think, for Simo and Burke because of that.
Yeah, and just think about the guys like Xander Sechrist. That was his senior year. Kirby Connell, who had been here the year before Xander arrived. And you got to see those guys just continue to grow in terms of their ability on the mound, as well as the faith that the staff had in them to go out and get the job done. What Xander Sechrist did last year, I think it is the greatest 6 consecutive starts that any college pitcher at any point in time has probably executed, because Tennessee either advanced to something specific or won something specific each and every time he went out. His numbers were off the charts, and you just knew when you started the game with him on the mound, it was going to be fine for Tennessee. And so, again, there are so many great stories, but you're right. Length of service in the uniform is something that will create not just fan appreciation, but I think for some guys, it's kind of Big Orange Country legend status.
Who are you most fired up to see this year, John? Who have you circled that you're like, I'm really excited to call some games for him in 10 days?
Well, like everybody else, I can't wait to see this team take the field because you just know, all right, you hear about Liam Doyle. You got to see him last year as he pitched for Ole Miss. He's somebody that they kind of say right now might be the guy who's the tone setter on Fridays. Then you have Andrew Fisher, who makes the move also from Oxford to Knoxville. You have to replace some big bats because not only, again, you replace all 5 guys that hit 20 or more home runs. Gavin Keelan from Louisville, he was probably the most highly regarded prospect that left the program, an accomplished one like Louisville, to come to Tennessee. So anxious to see that. And at the same time, love the way that Dean Curley competed as a freshman from start to finish. So I look forward to seeing whether or not he has advanced his game, or I should say how he has advanced his game. Hunter Ensley, I think it's perfect that while there was the opportunity to perhaps pursue pro ball, why leave when you're having so much fun wearing the orange and white? And for somebody who had to wait until his body was ready after how he wrecked it as a high school quarterback, to then get out there and contribute the way he did, especially with the momentous plays that he made in a huge couple of instances out in Omaha, what a way for him to ride off into the sunset. And then you also have one of the guys who's probably been the most decorated and recognized going from last season to this season, Nate Snead. He was somebody who was thought to be your closer. That never really materialized because he was so good in long relief as he kind of teamed up with Drew Beam on Saturdays. But I just think that he has the potential. He has starter stuff, if indeed that's how they want to use him, or he is somebody who might work in consecutive games as he did to help Tennessee close out its run to its first ever national championship. If you've got freshmen, you've got such highly regarded freshmen. Teegan Kuhns, I think, is a very impressive right-hander who's got a chance and will likely be in the weekend rotation. And then at the same time, Jay Abernathy might be one of the most highly rated players that Tennessee's been able to get to campus since somebody like Christian Moore. Completely different players, but still such an incredible amount of talent for such a young man. So again, you won't lack for people to point to in the orange and white because they know that there's going to be opportunity to get out there and compete and be the best of the best against the best of the best.
Yeah, I'm excited about Abernathy. Everybody you talk to about Abernathy, it's like he's different. He's also someone just Tennessee fans have not seen because I think, like you said, he's not Simo. He's not. I mean, he's a souped up version of Seth Stevenson, I think, in a lot of ways. And
I like that comparison.
I like you just haven't had that. I mean, Tennessee's had to figure it out. I mean, Simo was an Acuna type leadoff guy last year. Mauyahuna, I don't think was a natural leadoff guy 2 years prior. That never really materialized. But you just kind of look at it and you're like, Tennessee's never really had like the traditional just on base, speedy, just he can hit the ball, spray the ball anywhere type of guy. And it's Abernathy, but putting that on a true freshman, I don't know. Is he that talented that you're comfortable just rolling him out as a leadoff guy? Do you put him in the 9 hole just so that he can, if he does get on base, then you have your top hitters right there to push him around the 1 and 2 spot to kind of ease him into the fold there. I'm very fascinated, like you, to see what Abernathy looks like for Tennessee because that left field spot seems still like the one that's most open coming into the 2020-25 season. Because I don't know if you're like this, John, but I would have loved if we could have just gotten one of Dreiling or Tears back for this year. Just one, like just one of them back. It like losing them both just hurts because I just think that is so much production from a year ago. And to lose Burke, to lose Semo, to lose Dreiling, to lose Tiers, to lose Amick, that is a whole lot of firepower. And if you just Dreiling back in left field would have solved as a 1-year just final, just to ease this next guys, the Levi Clarks, the Stone Lawlesses, the Jay Abernathys, to kind of blend just kind of get us through this year to get back to superpower mode here in 26. I don't know. I don't know if you felt like that at all, but like Dreiling, if I could have anybody back from last year's team, it'd actually be Dreiling, because I just think that spot, if you have that cleared up, because then you're just Dreiling, Inslee, Chapman, that makes a lot of sense. That's a lot of upside. And then everything in the infield, I think, is going to take care of itself too. So I don't know. I would have loved Dreiling back for one more year.
It would have been fantastic. And like you said, it's hard to get used to. You only got 2 years with him.
Yeah.
But it is unfortunately the lay of the land. And boy, credit to Dylan for turning himself into the very highly regarded prospect he is now with the Texas Rangers, because that's one of the things that probably also didn't get as much spotlight as it should have. And that's just the incredible amount of hours that both Dylan and Kavares poured into their games. I mean, for Kavares Tiers, just to think that he has 2 home runs the year before and was also a little bit banged up from time to time. But I mean, he did so much to reshape himself physically, and then all of the hours that he put in the cage, he just tormented opposing pitchers, and then also turned himself into, like Blake Burke, a plus defender in the outfield. So yeah, I do think that it would have been awesome to have both. But I mean, Dylan or KT to be back one more year, because just something to it be less of a shock to the system that all 5 have to move on.
Final thing here, and I'll let you go, John. I'm curious with how much you're talking. You're doing the morning show. You're doing Tennessee baseball here. Do you have any like pregame tricks? Do you have any rituals to keep the voice intact? Are you a big tea guy? Are you a big like just voice exercise person? What do you do now that we're getting into your busiest season, John? How do you keep the voice intact?
It was a few years ago that as a nightly routine, my wife started making us tea at night with honey in it. And every now and then, even regardless of what you do to try and keep yourself between the lines as you go from one to the next, things can get gummed up. I haven't tried it yet, but I heard Mike Keith talk about one of the ways to work past that is pineapple juice. So I do like to have that perhaps in the ready should it be necessary, but I do drink at least 1 cup of warm tea a day with a little bit of honey in it. And thankfully, and also try to stay hydrated. Water always helps.
Wait, what kind of tea are we talking here? Are we talking black tea? Are we talking what kind of tea? Earl Grey? What are we going with, John?
I'm more of a green tea guy, and I will also enjoy the flavors that whether it's a peach or a mango, pomegranate, elderberry, and stuff like that. My wife is more of the English breakfast tea, the Earl Grey, the Lady Earl. So she goes more with the straight up teas, and I kind of like to have just a little bit of a sense of flavor.
There you go. I love it. John Wilkerson, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at 991 The Sports Animal this week? And when we'll hear you back on the Tennessee baseball airwaves? Next week. It's almost here. Strap in, John.
A week from Friday. I mean, Valentine's Day is when it starts, and I can't wait to see everything that goes into Hofstra being here. Can't wait also to see what Lindsey Nelson Stadium will be like at the time they pause the construction and the expansion just to let folks through the gates. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we'll start out with the broadcast on utsports.com. We will pick up our coverage on the Sports Animal probably about a week or so away from conference play. And, of course, Lady Vols basketball, Tennessee Volunteers basketball, that can always knock us back to either the app and or utsports.com. But, I mean, there's just so much going on. You've got the Lady Vols in the top 20, the Tennessee Volunteers in the top 5. Softball starts this week. So we're going to be busy, and folks are going to be able to find it one way, shape, or form, either through Sports Animal, the Sports Animal, or through the UT Game Day app and utsports.com. But, Chase, I sure do appreciate the conversation. And thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you, John. And this was great. I appreciate you making the time, and good luck this season. We'll have to check back in again soon.
Please do. Anytime. I sure do appreciate it, and thank you.
The Chase Thomas Podcast. For people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I am now joined by Tennessee first baseman, DH, outfielder. Who knows? He might be a starting pitcher this year. Like Dalton Bargo is a man. He wears many hats for the University of Tennessee. Is that in play? Can we look out for Dalton Bargo like Sunday starter? Who says no?
I don't know if Coach Vitello is going to let that one slide, but yeah, you never know.
It's kind of interesting because last year and at this point in your Tennessee baseball career, I'm fascinated by a lot of different aspects to your career thus far, Dalton. But one of the ones that I'm most interested in out of the jump here is that you are a man who, in all seriousness, does wear many hats. Like you can play first base, you can play third base like you did last year, you can be in the outfield, you can play DH, you can do a lot of different things. Is that something that you always were intentional about in your baseball career, that you wanted to be as versatile as possible? Because shortstop, and that's what I'm gonna focus on. I'm gonna be center field, or I'm gonna be a starter. Like, did you actually have a different take where you're like, I kind of want to be versatile. I want to be able to play a lot of different things in my college career?
No, yeah, I mean it's been like that. I've been that way since I was a little kid, like 7 or 8. I've always been taught that the more positions that you can play, the more opportunities you're going to get as you keep going on in baseball. And obviously, it's helped me out pretty well being where I'm at now. But no, that's just something that my coaches when I was younger have always preached, and something I've believed in, and it's helped me so far.
How did you approach this off season differently than last, with just kind of like the openings and a lot more competition and a lot more I guess a lot easier pass to the field, with just so much turnover from a year ago? How did you approach the offseason differently with that in mind?
I wouldn't say I necessarily approach the offseason any different than I have in the past. I've always been, working on what I need to get better at, but like perfecting what I'm good at and stuff like that. But a lot of it has been like off like character, I guess you could say, is
Hmm.
kind of stepping in that leader role this year, and being the guy that the younger guys look up to, and um, making myself be that guy that is part of the heart and soul of this team. And being my junior year and a year under my belt here now, and kind of just stepping up into that role of being the leader and being one of the guys this year.
Is that something that's natural? Are you a natural leader, like a Hunter Inslee, or is it more something you gotta have to learn as you go, and you kind of had to get more and more comfortable as time's gone on?
No, I've definitely always been some sort of a leader throughout my baseball career. Like high school, I was more that vocal, that leader that people looked up to. I was always the one working harder than everybody else, trying to get other guys to buy in with that. And um, then I think this year I'm going to be more of a vocal leader, kind of on the field and directing traffic, but also being that guy in the locker room that's picking people up, or helping the younger guys out if they're kind of lost or don't know what to do, just kind of helping them out in that aspect. But yeah, I've always kind of been a leader, just in a different way, I guess you could say.
Is there anyone you've already kind of like taken aside of like to get ready for, like, this is a super talented freshman class that's come in here? Is there anyone that you've already kind of been like, hey, follow my lead, this is how things go at
I
Tennessee?
wouldn't say anybody specifically or individually. I just kind of help them if they have any questions. I just want to be the guy they can come to, and I'll help them out no matter what, and just kind of be there for them. And because we've all been a freshman before, we've all been there before, and it's scary. It can be scary at first, your first year, but I just kind of want to be that guy that helps them through it, and kind of makes it a little bit easier for them.
Was there anything in particular that you've kind of zoned in on, or maybe the staff wanted you to focus on this offseason to really get ready for your junior year?
I would say just being a little bit more consistent
Hmm.
with everything, especially at the plate. Kind of keeping the same mindset uh, each at bat. Separating at bat from at bat, and not letting one at bat affect the other, and then kind of separating offense to defense, because I'm going to get more looks defensively this year. So just kind of doing that, and like I said, they've wanted me to step up and be that leader guy on the team. So just um, working on that and working on myself so that the younger guys have a pretty good role model to look up to.
Is there a position that you feel most comfortable with in the field? Is it first? Is it third? Is it somewhere in the outfield? Is there somewhere that you feel most confident, or not even confident, just comfortable? Like you just feel like that's your natural spot?
Yeah, I've always kind of felt most comfortable at the corner infields, either third or first. It doesn't really matter for me. And I mean, I've been working behind the plate as well
Yeah.
this offseason. So, I mean, I've always felt comfortable there. But any of those three are my most comfortable. But after getting reps in the outfield, it's nothing but reading the fly ball off the bat.
I like it. So when you think about the batting order, where do you feel most comfortable? Because like there's some guys who, I mean, like this year's lineup, I'm really curious to see what it looks like starting next weekend. But is there some guys are like, I need to be in the 3-hole, I need to be a leadoff guy. There's some, it just for whatever reason, they're more comfortable in certain parts of the order. Is there a portion of the order that you've always felt more comfortable in?
Growing up, I've always kind of been a middle of the bat or middle of the lineup kind of bat, that 2 through kind of 6 area. But no, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I just want to be in the lineup and whatever order works best for our group and the best 9 that we get out there. And wherever I fall into there, I'm going to go with it and do the best I can.
You were a part of the DH rotation last year on the title team here at Tennessee. And I'm curious from your experience, what was that like, staying ready and not knowing when you were going to get the call, when you were going to go in? And did that help you in the end? It's like, hey, you always have to stay ready. You, Reese, and Cannon, and everybody there, Colby. Was that beneficial ultimately that you were that the DH that kind of rotation? You just like had to stay ready like that?
No, yeah, it's definitely helped me in the long run and the bigger picture looking at it. I mean, it was definitely tough in the moment just because it's kind of like a guessing game of but it was, I mean, then again, like whoever got the call that day, like the rest of us had their back and were ready to go. And if our name got called, but we always wanted to see our brother succeed. So, but I think in the end, it helped all of us a pretty good amount.
Do you approach the game day differently if you're a DH versus playing in the field? Is it more pressure because you're like, my moments are, I get 3 guaranteed just about, and like at the plate, and you're not gonna be able to make plays in the field? Is it just a different mindset, or do you go into it the same way, whether you're a DH or you're doing both?
I try to go in the same way. The harder thing is during the game, while we're on defense, is kind of separating that offense from defense when you're not able to go out and play defense is more the harder thing. But no, before game preparation, it's all kind of the same. It's I mean, I got the same routine no matter if I'm in the lineup, DHing, in the field, anything like that. So it's just and baseball is a lot about routine. People call it superstitious or whatever, but I like to call it routine. So it's kind of the same each day.
Do you have any like funny rituals or things that you swear by on game day?
I put my socks on this in the same order. I usually get dressed in the same order for everything. Tie my shoes in the same order. And I usually try to eat like the same meals for game days or whatever's working at that point in time.
Okay.
I'll stick to that. But other than
what are you going with? What's been the most consistent?
Last year was a lot of like if we were at home, it was Dos Bros for lunch.
Okay.
So that pretty good place, but it'll kind of just depend on my mood and what's working for me at that point in time.
Where do you think you've improved the most from the time you first arrived at Tennessee to right now, a week and a half before opening day?
I would say on the mental side of the game more than anything. That was kind of always my biggest downfall growing up. I was really hard on myself and always expect a lot of myself, and sometimes I was way too hard on myself. But I think getting with some sports psychologists and stuff like that, I've really improved on that side of things and kind of getting back to where it's just you're playing a little kid's game. I mean, you got to think you're playing a little kid's game, and I'm 20 years old, and so you got to remember that. And I think that's kind of what's helped me a lot with it.
I love that. When you look at we mentioned here at the top of like a lot of these the super talented freshman class that's come in here, Dalton, that a lot of Tennessee fans are excited to see mix in with the vets like yourself this season. Is there anyone particular that from this fall and winter that you've seen and you're like, I'm really excited about these guys?
Yeah, one that really stands out is actually a pitcher, Teegan Kuhns. Really talented freshman right-handed pitcher. He's got he's got a bright future ahead of him. Especially he needs to fill out a little bit, and I give him some stuff about that. But he's really good. He's got good stuff. He's already got good presence and holds himself well on the mound as a freshman. And another two are Jay Abernathy, who's got really all skills you want in a player, and then Levi Clark, who really showed out with the bat. And I think those two freshmen they're gonna get a lot of at bats, and all three of them are gonna get a lot of time with us this year on the field. And I'm really excited to see what they can do.
What do you want to do differently at the plate this year when you're going back and watching film from last year and thinking about like how I can get better here? Is it just how you attack early in the count? Is there things that like you want to hit for more power? Are you think about your launch angle a little bit more? What have you looked at that you really want to? Because you're a really good hitter, and I've compared you to it's kind of in that Jared Dickey zone where I just think you are really good at always having good at bats, and just you're a hard guy to get out. And I just kind of wonder what's that next step? What have you looked at this offseason that you're like, I want to do this a little bit differently based on what I saw last year?
One thing I really want to do differently is cut down on the strikeouts. I'd say that I think that's my biggest downfall. But I think what's going to help me do that is allowing myself to be free and easy, and not because there would be times where I would get tense, and that's when I would overswing at pitches. But I think the biggest thing that's going to help me this year is if I just stay free and easy. And I've always had really good hands, so just letting my hands work and just putting barrel on the baseball more consistently, and I think that'll really help me.
What are you most excited about for this year? What are you most excited about for Tennessee baseball in 2025?
Just to see how we compete this year, because especially after last year and winning the national championship, and then we got about half the roster this year is new guys, so it'll be pretty fun to see how those guys kind of fit in. And I mean, from the inter squads and all that stuff, like they all fit in really well, and we've all meshed really well and came together. And so it'll be really fun to see how we compete, especially with how much talent we have this year.
What's the most underrated thing that you see with Tony Vitello that makes him an elite head coach that the fans might not see or national folks might not see?
Just how much he cares and loves us. And I mean, he kind of acts like our dad every once in a while, and kind of that father figure when we're away from home. But, he loves each and every one of us. And I mean, he'll obviously show it differently. But he'll show it on the field. Some people just think he's crazy when he goes crazy on the field, but no, he's fighting for us, and he's trying to protect us, and he just cares for us so much.
I love it. Do you ever want to change numbers? Is there a favorite number for you? Like if you could have any number at Tennessee, or do you have it right now?
So my first ever baseball number was actually 16.
Okay.
And then when I got older, I changed it to 6.
Okay.
But my first option when I got to Tennessee was 16.
Okay.
Yes.
Why'd you switch from 16 to 6?
When I was younger, I was the bat boy at Kansas State when I was 5.
Okay.
And one of the guys that was kind of my favorite on that team wore number 6. So that's kind of why I wore it. Yeah.
Are you a big Chiefs guy?
I am a big Chiefs guy.
How do you think it's going to go on Sunday?
Hopefully we pull it out. I know a lot of the country aren't really Chiefs fans, think the refs get them, but I hope we pull it out. I really do.
I think three-peat's special. I don't know if you'll see it again. It's almost it's impossible in the NFL to pull off a three-peat, and to do it for the first time ever would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. Well, Dalton, this has been fantastic. I greatly appreciate you making the time here tonight. I'm excited to see you in the squad here a week and a half from now, back on the diamond at LNS. Are you ready for the like? How crazy is it with the new construction and everything? Like, it's going to be a madhouse soon enough.
Yeah, no, it's going to be crazy. We get a lot of fans there. We're
Yeah,
going to get a lot more fans, and it'll be loud per usual, but I'm ready to see what it looks like filled up with all the constructions done.
I love it. Dalton Bargo, I appreciate the time tonight. Good luck this season. You're going to do great at Tennessee this year, and I'm excited to see what year 2 has in store for you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.